There was a girl in the magazines, a girl on the front, the girl who wears all those precious dresses, which I love, don't misunderstand, but the girl who just smiles is pretty, but how you say, bland. That's who they want. They want this girl who likes posing, who wears only one side, who is skilled at leaning gracefully in doorways, happy to glide down his staircase and sparkle as we cry.
Laura, fantastic. Welcome.
Hello.
Lovely to hear your dulcet tones, albeit remotely.
Always remotely now.
Oh my goodness, what a difference a year makes. And,
oh my goodness.
But you found yourself the best possible diversion in such an awful year by marrying the lovely George Blagden and bringing a new human into the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, my 2020, I think lots of people's 2020 would just be pandemic, but mine was being pregnant. So, yeah, I mean, talk about choosing your moments to do it. It was something that happened before lockdown. And then someone said to me, in fact, it's like you timed it perfectly. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, you know, once you get to a certain point when you're pregnant, you probably can't work much anyway.
Yes.
And it's not like you're going to be missing out on anything. And I thought, I mean, that's sort of true, but I'd still rather not have a pandemic.
No, I know, but it's a positive way of looking at it, isn't it? And
It is.
And I think, given that you've had the time to devote to the little one, and you know, that's a positive that you can take away from
It
it.
really is. It really is. It's tough, but we're having wonderful moments in our little bubble.
Wonderful, fantastic. That's great. And you've been to Vienna with George. He was filming.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right. We went and lived out there for a month as soon as he was born. So that was interesting, getting on a plane on my own with my newborn child.
Oh my goodness me! And we were all learning new skills at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
I'm going to rewind back to 2012 when I ventured into a railway tunnel near London Bridge to see what I still think is the best production I've seen ever of Jerry Herman's Mack Mabel. And I remember this was the first time I'd seen you perform, and I remember thinking, who is this girl? And why am I so insanely jealous of her hair? And nothing much has changed, really. But it's interesting, so many people remember that show, because I think Jerry Herman's musicals have always been sold as bigger and brasher than they actually are. And there was something about the way that Tom Sutherland made a virtue of that rather dingy environment and evoked the end of an era with a whole warehouse of discarded props and equipment. And I remember the opening to this day where we were looking down the lens of a projector as it flickered images into the audience. It was a wonderful show, and it was my introduction to you, so I shall never forget it.
It was a wonderful show to do. Yeah, I mean, it was utterly terrifying. I remember, I think I had 2 weeks to rehearse for that because I was over in Belfast doing Sweet Charity.
Yeah.
And I'd had a phone call from Tom saying, you know, I really want you to do it. And I said, well, I can't because I can't be there for rehearsals because, you know, you start and I'm still in Belfast. And then about 2 weeks later, I had a phone call from him saying, okay, do you think you could do it in 2 weeks? And I said, what? I said, what do you mean? And I just went, yes, absolutely, because I couldn't turn down an opportunity like that. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made, as crazy as it was. I think I got off the flight from Belfast and went straight to the rehearsal room, and at which point they'd been rehearsing for a few weeks already. But it sort of felt right, because Mabel walked in to their world, you know, in the show. That's what she does, and it's sort of she makes a late entrance in rehearsals as well.
Exactly. No, I mean, I actually lie because I had seen you briefly at a Janie D cabaret at Crazy Cox when she did what Janie always does and dragged you out of the audience to sing a number. Because you'd been in Hello Dolly with her, hadn't you?
That's right. We just finished Hello Dolly, and it was my 30th birthday that day. Oh. And she said, what are you doing for your birthday? I said, oh, I don't know, nothing major. She said, please come and sing at my cabaret.
Oh, Janie,
that's
Janie, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
So we were supposed to do a show together down at Chichester, because I've been doing one or two live streams from the Festival Theatre, and unfortunately, because things went so wrong in that suddenly we weren't allowed to have an audience, and they didn't have enough time to resell the tickets on a different basis. We had to postpone it. I don't know when it'll happen, if ever. But
well, if Janie's got anything to do with it, it will definitely happen.
Oh, I know. She's
so
a force of nature, isn't she?
She's such a yes woman.
Yes. Absolutely.
You know, she gets ideas, and a lot of people get ideas and they never follow them through. But not Janie. She'll get an idea, and you know, a year later you'll get a phone call saying, "Do you remember?"
Now, I remember you saying to me that after graduating from drama school, you went to see Sunday in the Park with George, and that was a kind of seminal moment for you.
It was.
The writing on the wall was there, and it said Sondheim.
It did, yeah. It was, I really strongly remember that moment, because it was the moment I thought, that's the sort of theatre I want to be making. And I'd never been to that venue, and in fact, I don't think in London I'd ever been to one of these smaller venues.
It was.
You know.
Did you see it at the Menier?
Yeah, I saw it both. I saw both at the Menier and at the
Wyndham's.
It was the Wyndham's. Yeah.
Yes.
So I saw both AJ, Anna Jane Casey, and Jenna Russell, and both of them as brilliant as each other. And I just remember sitting there thinking, this is the sort of theatre I want to be making. It just felt really creative, and it just felt completely about the piece and the material and real.
Yes.
You know?
And I mean, it's such an astounding piece as well. You know, you can be creative with these shows. That's the thing about them. Right. They lend themselves to different interpretations. It's one of the great things about Sondheim as a dramatist, I think, is he... I remember two things vividly about the show we did together at the Pizza Express in Holborn. And one was you singing Loving You from Passion.
Yes.
Beautiful song. And I said, you're way too beautiful to play Fosca. And you said you should see me first thing in the morning.
Yeah, especially after just having a baby. I mean, I don't think I've put makeup on for about a year. Yeah. But, it is. It's one of those roles that, I'd love to play.
It's on the bucket list.
It's on the bucket list, yeah.
Absolutely.
Along with most Sondheim shows. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The other number I remember, because it was just such an intense 2 minutes, and you did it out of context, which is always harder, was You Don't Know This Man from Jason Robert Brown's Parade, which you had done again with Tom Sutherland.
Yeah, well, that was the first...
At Southwark.
Yeah, that was the first show we ever did together.
Gosh, what a great first show it was for Jason
really
Robert as well. What was he, 29 or something?
Yeah, and I can't quite believe he was that young when he wrote it. It's for me, it's such a perfect piece. It's so perfect. But I remember it was so interesting, Parade, because Tom and I had met each other years ago when we were both working front of house at Mary Poppins.
Right.
And I remember walking in to this audition, and I looked at Tom, and Tom looked at me, and we were like, oh my goodness, hi! And it was so surreal. And suddenly I felt like, oh no, this is going to be awful and awkward. And it wasn't. It was perfect. But yeah, that was.
Who was your Frank?
It was Alistair Brookshaw.
Yeah.
He was wonderful.
But you see, the great thing about that piece, again, is they're two such meaty roles, but it's, it's so intense and so highly emotional.
Yeah.
And that duet, the climactic duet.
And then it just tears you to pieces. For me, it's the most perfect piece where text goes into song. The segue of that is so... It never felt, although on paper it's a really tough thing, Lucille, the role, but... And I remember thinking, gosh, this is going to be really tough to do 8 shows a week in a dark, damp tunnel, and in the middle of London. And I remember it being weirdly one of the easiest things ever because every intention is so perfect and every song happens at precisely the moment it should happen and pitched in precisely the right way. you know as an actor that it's right, that it's a perfect piece because it feels easy.
Isn't this also why Sondheim always has stuck to the book song format, and chosen his book writers so carefully? Because A, he loves the collaborative process, but also B, he loves that idea of speech into song, which is so hard to achieve. Funnily enough, I once asked Claude Michel Schomburg I've asked various people why they write through sung pieces. And Claude Michel gave the most, well, they all gave honest responses, but I loved his. And he said, because he said, me and Alain are not clever enough to do what Sondheim does. And I thought it was
honest,
very honest, and it's true. It's the hardest thing in the world to get that relationship between book and song working.
Yeah, and you really know when it doesn't. It's because you have to work so much harder as an actor,
right,
to make it work.
Did you feel that the book on Mack and Mabel was problematic for you? Because, you know, people are very critical of that book, as indeed they are with many, many famous musicals.
Yeah.
How was it?
Well, I know Tom, because I think there's 2 scripts of Mack and Mabel, and I know that he incorporated a bit of both into it.
Well, there's the one with the awful happy ending kind of thing. Or,
that's, yeah.
Yes, which because Broadway wasn't accustomed at the time for unhappy endings, they adjusted it, which I think was a bad idea. But
yeah. Well, we didn't have that one for sure.
No.
But I know that Tom, I mean, he was allowed to as well, but it was slightly padded out the book, which really helped, because the thing is about the character of Mabel is, I think it was originally written for sort of Bernadette Peters, I think. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, it was.
It feels like, when you see it, the simplicity of the book, and then it's just these songs. And it was like these songs have just been written. It's like walk on, sing a massive number, walk off, walk on. That's what Mabel feels like when I first read it, and especially the song "Time Heals Everything." It's such a poignant moment, and the original script to it was so thin, and suddenly she's breaking your heart on stage and breaking her heart, and I remember thinking, wow, that's quite tough to get to in such...
Well, they've got to be the emotional climacterics, haven't they, the numbers? And if they just arrive, you know...
That's right. That's right.
It never works.
And it just feels a bit flashy, you know, and that's absolutely the production that we didn't want to create at Southwark Playhouse.
I thought the book for Parade was also really special. And in fact, the whole show works a treat. I've seen it about 4 times in different productions.
Goodness.
And it always works. And what about Jason Rolled-Brown? Tell me, have you had much to do? I know you did a festival hall event.
I did.
With him, because he's got this reputation. I mean, he's a genius, I think, but he's got a reputation because he's such a perfectionist and so highly strung that he can be extremely difficult. What's your experience of him?
Do you know, I did do the festival hall concert with him, and I think it was the most nervous I think I've ever been. I remember the day before we had to go and have a one-on-one with Jason, and I was absolutely petrified, thinking, I'm coming to sing one of your songs. And I mean, I idolised him for a long time, because when I was at drama school, Jason Robert Brown was the big thing. I mean, you did his numbers for everything. And so it was, you know, like meeting your idol, and he was so lovely. And I realised that he's not people had said to me he can be difficult, but he's not difficult. He takes care of his work.
Yeah.
And I personally find that really impressive, is that he cares about what he's written and his intention. And I think, you know, that's commendable to me. It's that he loves what he does, and he puts a lot of time into it, and that detail is important to him, and why shouldn't it be?
Yes, exactly. It's often the idea of people being exacting is often confused with being difficult, because you care. Suddenly you become, they're difficult because they don't conform all the time. It's an interesting distinction in show business. Incidentally, did you know that how Prince offered Sondheim Parade as a project before it went to Jason Rothman? Yeah. And he decided he didn't want to do it. And that surprises me because, with the Jewish connection and as a piece of terrific drama set against that backdrop of the Civil War, I thought he would have jumped at it. But there you go. That's an interesting fact, isn't it?
It's funny how things play out, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Southwark has been a bit of a sort of a constant with you, and it's about to open its third incarnation as a venue. But of course, the last time I saw you there was Sideshow, which was the Bill Russell and Henry Krieger musical where you were joined at the hip with Louise Dearman.
It just sounds so funny when you say it, doesn't it? Yes. Joined at the hip.
Yeah. I actually saw it on Broadway with Emily Skinner and Alice Ripley. And it's one of those sort of pieces that has got a bit of a cult following among muso theatre people. It's a bit generic as a score, I've always thought, and as much as I devour its emotive big numbers and the two big duets, I think the book is really clunky, actually. I mean, we can be frank about it.
No, we can. It's a tough book. It is a tough book. Doing it at the Southwark Playhouse, again, it's one of those things where you can strip back the sort of Broadway feel of it, and just the way we did it was we just told this story about these two girls, and that's really what it is. And it's for me, it was an extraordinary piece because of the challenges of it. And the thought, I remember initially thinking, being attached to somebody, like, how do you go about doing that, performing that every night? Well, luckily it was Louise Dearman, who is now just one of my dearest friends.
Talented lady.
Oh, she's so talented, and she doesn't know it either. She doesn't know how talented she is, which makes it even more wonderful. But I remember, rehearsals, obviously, you're attached to each other. And I remember thinking, well, this is exactly how it would have been, because we had to compromise, Lou and I, so much. Lou might want to have done something, but I didn't want to, and the whole rehearsal was about us two compromising with each other, and it just meant that when we were on stage, you just had these two really selfless beings, because we were just looking after each other, and it was just so wonderful to do every night.
That's the essence of the piece, isn't it? The idea of, they so long to have independent emotional attachments to other people, as well as to each other. And I think that potentially with a better book, it's a very interesting concept.
For sure.
Of what goes through the minds of Siamese twins who, and now they do miraculous things separating people, but, it's extraordinary. And can one really exist without the other? And the dependency, all those elements are so interesting.
It's heartbreaking. It's a really heartbreaking story.
Extraordinary. It's high time, Laura, that you originated a musical in the West End. I've been kind of quietly lobbying it wherever I can, and we all do. And just out of interest, I mean, now you've got your little family. It must make the disappointments slightly easier, I would have thought. But during my brief stint as an actor, I found it so tough dealing with disappointment. I was never destined for it, really. I work in a world now which has fewer disappointments than I experienced in my 8 years as an actor. Have you got a philosophy about this? Because some people handle it really well.
I think I definitely handle it much better now than I ever did. I remember I had quite a slow start. I mean, I came out of drama school and it was very slow for me. I didn't have the best agent in the world, and I remember thinking, I don't know if I can do this. And then I got my first job and I tasted it and I thought, well, that's it. I've got no choice. I've got to do it because it's what makes me very happy. But it comes with heartbreak all the time. And, you know, one of the other worst things is when you hear that something's coming that you really, really want to do. And often you go, I know that's not going to be mine. I just know it. And it's saddening, but you get used to it, and you get used to your backbone, becomes stronger, and you focus on the next thing.
Well,
and if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. I mean, that's all you can do.
It's a wonderful way of looking at it. I think many of the youngsters now are developing tougher resilience to these disappointments. I mean, someone like young Rob Houchen, who is a real star, I think, and has a sensational instrument, and but he's very laid back about when things don't work out and don't happen. I think that's admirable, because when you're younger and eager, it's terrible when when you have to deal with that constantly.
Well, you feel like it's a personal attack on you or something, when you're younger.
Exactly.
And then you get a bit older and you go, well, that one wasn't meant to be. And then you wait to see who's been cast in it, and that's the best bit. Is that you go, what? Or you go, well, that makes complete sense, and they deserve it. So you force yourself to make sense of it, to get through it, I think.
But what's interesting, of course, having said I'd love to see you originate a musical in the West End, most of the most interesting work is happening off West End, on the fringe.
So
and
true.
The future of new writing, especially new writing. In that sense, actors are having to adapt to making less money, I suppose, working off West End than they would in the West End, but doing more interesting pieces.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically been my life. I've never made that much money from this. But I like to think it's because I've chosen projects that really interest me and stimulate me, and I've never done a year's run of anything. Not that I wouldn't, it's something I just haven't done. I mean, I do 6 weeks or something, and every single one of those performances I savour, and I'm always ready to go, okay, I'm ready to put that to bed now. The thought of doing something for a year is a challenge within itself, I think, and it's a skill that you have to acquire along the way. And
maintaining a show, that you often hear the big stars talking about what it takes to do an 8-show a week run for 2-3 years, sometimes.
The maintenance of it is hard work, and not only physically but mentally as well, when you do quite a long run. I mean, I remember doing, when I did Barnum at the Chocolate Factory, it was quite a long run compared to what I usually do. And I got to the last week, and I remember I was on stage and I forgot one of my lines. And it was fine. I think I made something up that was quite similar.
It happens, yeah.
Yeah, and then this little person got in my head and said, imagine if on the last week you forgot all of your lines. Well, that's what happened, Ed. I couldn't remember a single thing. I'd planted this little bug in my head.
Oh, God.
It was one of the worst moments of my life, I think.
That's an interesting psychology there, right there. Because I've come across actors who've had moments in shows that were problematic for them. And one in particular, an old friend of mine who had a very revealing top note in a show, and it became an obsession.
Yes.
And it got to the point where he couldn't sing it anymore. He just could not approach the note anymore. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's what we do to ourselves, isn't it? It's how we,
it's awful.
It's just horrendous. I mean, we joke about having these dreams about, you're an actor and you're about to go on stage and you can't remember a single line. But when it actually gets to you in reality, And that's really
It's awful.
scary.
And the punishment that you give yourself after, it's ridiculous. And I remember after that show, I went out and I had quite a lot of friends in that afternoon. And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I just completely forgot everything.
Yeah.
And they said they didn't even realise whether they were lying or not, but they're pretty honest normally. But to me, I punished myself so much because, you're stood in the middle of the stage thinking, what am I doing?
Yeah, I know. Well, your first ever professional show was Follies, I believe, where you played young Heidi.
Yeah.
Sporting that legit voice that has served you so well. I mean, who was the older Heidi in that production?
So, Ed, it was
Do you
amazing.
remember?
We had, it was at Northampton at the Royal and Down Gate, and we were half professional cast, half community cast of all these, sorry to say, but older ladies who were in the amateur group societies around Northampton, and they'd all auditioned. So we had the four, the Sally and the Buddy and the four older ones, and then we had all the younger girls were professionals as well. And then the rest of the cast, so the Broadway Baby, and they were all community cast. And they were absolutely incredible. It was one of the most brilliant pieces I've ever been involved in, because these women just made me realise why I do what I do, because the enjoyment they had from that, I think we were on for 3 weeks, was just immense. They couldn't believe that they were doing this show with, people in the cast who were professionals. And
and again, it makes the piece, what the piece is about, more real, doesn't it?
Exactly. There were these real women, and one of them I think she'd lost her husband about a month before this, and it saved her. I remember her sitting down and saying to me, this show has saved me, because I didn't know where or what I was going to do with myself after this.
Sorry, I wish I'd seen that. You've since done Follies again at the Albert Hall, where you played young Phyllis, and Christine Baranski was... I mean, do tell your Christine Baranski story. I'm sure you've told me before, but I mean, we love her. There should be an Emmy for Best Performance by an Outfit. Her clothes in The Good Wife and The Good Fight on television were just extraordinary. She's a character and a half.
Oh, she is extraordinary, and a really, really lovely lady as well. Because I remember I was absolutely addicted to The Good Wife when The Call came through, and so I was watching her every day, and my agent said, they want you to play young Phyllis at the Albert Hall. And I was like, what? Yes, I'd love to. And they said, he said, the older Phyllis is Christine Baranski. Do you know her? And I thought he was joking. I was like, no, you're joking. Because honestly, she might as well have been living with me. I was watching about 5 episodes a day, because I was probably unemployed at the time.
Oh, I love those series.
Oh, yeah, they're addictive, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I just remembered I was so starstruck when I met her. I just remember being like, hi, I'm your younger self. I'm just the biggest fan of you. And she was like, you're such a sweetheart.
No, she's a very charismatic lady. I saw her in one of those encore series in New York.
Right.
And I'm desperately trying to think what the show was. I think it was Wonderful Town, actually, of Bernstein.
Wow.
But anyway, I did come to that Albert Hall performance. Now, here's an example of a show that would never... this next show we're going to talk about, Falsettos, William Finn's extraordinary piece, that would never play in the West End. I remember, because originally it was a trilogy. It was going to be 3 parts, In Trousers, March of the Falsettos, and Falsetto Land.
That's right.
And then it became a double bill eventually. And I remember seeing March of the Falsettos at what was then the New Theatre, or was it the Albury by then, on St Martin's Lane. Simon Green played one of the roles. I think he was
Right.
Whizzer in it.
Okay.
And it was just like a 90-minute show. And then I heard the album of Falsetto Land and thought, oh my God, this is the most extraordinary piece. And then I finally saw them both together on Broadway in 1992 with Mandy Patinkin and the whole gang.
Wow.
And when the magnitude of AIDS losses was still so raw that you could actually touch the emotion in the auditorium, it was extraordinary. Now, I've longed to see it since, and they revived it on Broadway, and then this revival at the Other Palace. And what a terrific cast you were.
Oh, that's very kind to say.
Really terrific.
They were an amazing bunch. It was a really hard piece.
God, it's difficult, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. You just need so long to learn it. I mean, it's a pretty much sung through piece, and it's so intricate. And just to make sense of it initially, you need a good couple of weeks sat down in a rehearsal room going, okay, right, what does this mean? We didn't have that time, unfortunately. But it was one of those pieces where I absolutely was not ready to do it on the first preview. I remember thinking, this is one of those nightmares where someone chucks you on stage and just says, go. And it was really like that. And it took quite a few weeks for all of us to find what it was, because it was so complex.
How long did you have, in fact?
I think we had about 3.5 weeks, maybe.
Oh, that's rep time. That's not enough for a...
Yeah. I mean, we needed a
particularly
good...
a show that difficult,
Yeah.
intricate.
Oh, it was so intricate. I mean, I can read music and, I play, so I was thinking, this will be fine, and it's not. It was really hard. And it was a tough show to do every night, emotionally and vocally and physically, and, you had to be really, really strong. And it, what it dealt with, the emotional side of it, especially for the characters Marvin and Whizzer, played just so brilliantly by Daniel Boyes and Oliver Saville.
Yeah, Oliver's going to do a podcast with me next week. So,
brilliant.
But, Daniel, I felt for Daniel that was his coming of age role. That was a career-defining role for him. I thought he was quite wonderful in it.
Oh, I'm going to tell him that because he'll love that.
No, I really thought he was quite wonderful in it.
I could completely agree. And the thing about Dan is that you could tell Dan that a million times and he'd never believe you. And I remember in rehearsals, because I'd never worked with Dan, I obviously knew of him and we'd met a little bit socially. And I couldn't stop watching him. And I didn't know why. I couldn't tell you why, but I was just completely drawn to him in rehearsals, and I remember thinking, wow, you're really special. And I think this pushed him emotionally. I don't think he'd maybe had a show that had done this for him, and it was deep. He really had to...
What was interesting about the piece is when it became a two-acter, what was interesting to me is it actually became a two-acter as the AIDS epidemic became real. So he started writing a piece that was not about the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And it became a piece about the AIDS epidemic and the terrible cost. And as you say, there are, I mean, William Finn anyway, I think is a huge talent, but he tends to write these very bleak kind of emotive songs, and I love his ballads. When I was doing my radio show Stage and Screen, my producer, we did a William Finn show, and he said, oh God, he said, the whole show is these gloomy ballads, Ed. He said, can we not have one off for good behaviour? And I said, Bill, this is where the man is at, this is why, there's one or two of those late ballads in the show. What's the title of that one? Unlikely Lovers.
Oh, beautiful. The quartet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, heartbreaking.
Yeah, no, it was a treat, and you were spectacular, and of course stopped the show every night with "I'm Breaking Down."
Oh, my goodness. I'm so glad I never have to do that again. It was petrifying every night. Oh, it was one of those songs where the introduction would start and you'd sort of go, here we go, and you'd jump on the roller coaster, and I can't remember anything else after that. You just go, you sort of turn everything off, and it ends, and you go, what just happened? I don't know what just happened there. But it was amazing to do it.
You're making me so. It's lovely to hear you talk about, the tightrope that actors walk, because I've always had huge respect for it. In fact, huge respect for any performer. Which, when I was writing as a critic in the classical world, people would, particularly about opera. Performers would say to me, what is it about your writing of opera that makes it different? And I said, because I've been there. I've been exposed on a stage.
Yes.
And, it's a different perspective completely.
Yeah.
Jesus, it really is. What do you play? You said do you play piano, Laura?
I play a bit of piano. I play the flute. And very recently, the ukulele, Ed.
Oh, my goodness.
I wrote a song. My husband, well, he wasn't my husband when he bought me a ukulele.
Oh.
And I decided to learn it and write a song for him on our wedding day.
Yeah.
Again, one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done. But, yeah.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. I didn't know you were you see, if I'd known that, I'd have got you... I've got you to bring it to Pizza Express. We'll have to do another one now.
I had to blow the dust off it first. Well, I used it because when I did Sunset Boulevard, Craig Riffle Horwood's Sunset Boulevard, and we were obviously actor musicians, so I played the flute in that. So it has been a wonderful thing as well. It actually really helped me sort of get my name out there a little bit, because Sunset we did at the Watermill, and that went into town, and a lot of people came to see it.
Extra skills, yes.
Extra skills.
And also it gets you between the notes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think anybody who's actually had to grapple with the reality of playing or music or singing or whatever, it's just brings so much more to it. Now, mentioned new writing. Richard Taylor's Flowers for Mrs. Harris.
Who's that? Richard Taylor?
I know. Do you know, I was first exposed to him when a friend of mine who was then the CEO of Joseph Weinberger's, who licensed a lot of shows, including all of Sondheim's catalogue. It's all changed now, but they did at the time. And he took me along to see this National Music Youth Theatre production of Whistle Down the Wind, Richard Taylor's Whistle Down the Wind.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about it. And he said, you've got to come and see this, Ed, because, I think this guy's I was completely blown away. And I went back to see it again. And that was the beginning of my on-off kind of sometime relationship with Richard. Of course, like so many geniuses of musical theatre, like I think of Howard Goodall as well, they're people who don't actually like musicals terribly. They just want to evolve the genre, turn it into something more or something different.
Yes.
And I think Flowers for Mrs. Harris is just a rather perfect show.
I couldn't agree more. I think Richard Taylor, you said it yourself, is an absolute genius. And I've never experienced the feeling that I experience listening to his music every night. What it does to you, it just moves you beyond belief. And I remember the scene in Flowers for Mrs. Harris where I walked down the stairs in the red dress, the red dress, and the orchestra.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk down there, and it wasn't because I was in this beautiful red dress. It was the music that came with it. I cried every night. It was just exquisite. He just is extraordinary.
And he orchestrates himself as well, doesn't he?
Yes.
So, I mean, when we talk about through composed or through sung, but through composed is a very different thing, and Richard's work is exactly that. It's every component has an emotional reason for being there.
And he knows, I just feel like he really knows voices very well.
Yeah.
He knows how to write for the right parts. You know, it's such a character-driven piece, Flowers and Mrs. Harris, and you know, I played two characters, and they're very different.
Yeah.
And the choices that he makes musically is just exquisite for each character. Yeah,
it's interesting. I talk about musical theatre evolving, because songs in the worlds that people like that Richard inhabit no longer have that set 8-bar structure. They come in all shapes and sizes, if they come at all. And I think, you know, in Mrs. Harris, there's really only one identifiable number, you might call it, which is Rain on Me.
Yes.
But everything else is kind of integrated totally into the fabric.
Yes, completely.
So that you might get 2 bars of something which sounds like it's going to be a song, but it moves on to something else.
Yeah, I love that it never indulges at any point, because Mrs. Harris wouldn't ever indulge, and I love that it doesn't do that, but it grabs its moments when it needs to, and you know, they can be short-lived at times, and it just, the hairs on the back of your neck just whoa, and then you come back down to reality again, and it's extraordinary what he does.
It is amazing, and of course I think Claire Burke was just born for that role, wasn't she? She'd been waiting for it all her life, probably.
Yes. Do you know, someone said to me a few months ago, they said, "You're like a young Claire Burt," and I nearly cried. I said, if I'm like a young Claire Burt, I will just be so happy.
Yes, yes.
Because for me, she's everything. She is wonderful. She's off stage, on stage. I can't take my eyes off her.
Yeah,
and
really special.
what
Really
she does
special.
with that role, extraordinary.
The ravishment of the piece, it's also a great example of how in musical theatre the raw material, the subject matter, must engage the audience on an emotional level before even a note of music is added.
Yeah.
And I think there are so many pieces where the book element, you know, the story element, the choice to turn something into a musical is just not right. And in this case, you know, from the moment it starts, after that first scene where you see her with her husband and then realise he's not there anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you're on this journey, this emotional journey.
You really are.
And people who, it's very sophisticated score. I mean, it reminds me of kind of, because it's quite chamber-like and yet very lush.
Yes,
so
it
it
is,
reminds me of Strauss's Ariadne auf Naxos, Richard Strauss, which is also an epic in a sense, but is also a chamber orchestra, and very lush as well. But you know, the audience that you have at Chichester, you know, they were on their feet at the end. Every performance, weren't they? Because it grabbed them emotionally.
Well, I think even if you try and fight it, which, you know, some people do go to the theatre and, you know, they're not prepared to be moved by something, and you can't help but be. I remember every night I'd finish my track, and we'd all wait backstage waiting for the bows, and there would be the very last scene that Claire did with her husband and with Mark Meadows. And every night I think, I'm not going to cry. And I did. But it wasn't just crying. It was that really guttural in your throat crying.
It's the letting go scene, isn't it? After that constant in her life, you know, where she... And the whole thing about the watch, and oh my goodness, it was
the loneliness.
It's such a special piece, and I'm glad it's got a life. And I think it's something that will cross genres, and I think it will play in many, many theatres. I hope so, across the world. There's no reason why it shouldn't. You look at, see, the people who are most interesting, I don't know if you agree, Laura, in music theatre are the ones who have a chameleon-like approach to style. So they write in the style of the subject matter. So, I mean, Richard's Flowers for Mrs. Harris is so different stylistically from The Go-Between, for example, his other show. And Howard Goodall's shows are all very different. Adam Gettle, you know, difference between Floyd Collins and Light in the Piazza.
And what a skill that is.
It's because it's so easy to write the generic score like Sideshow. Well, not easy, but it's what we come to expect in musical theatre, and the people that can move away from that are... Did you see a show by a chap called Darren Clark called The Life and Times of Benjamin Button?
Do you know, I didn't. That was at Southwark Playhouse, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I heard amazing things about it.
I mean, he's someone who writes in a folk idiom because that's his world, and you know, he plays guitar and he writes in a folk idiom. And it's not my world, but my goodness me, I am so full of admiration for it. And Benjamin Button was so beautiful. That should have a life.
Yes, I was going to say, are they going to do that again, do you think?
I hope so. I hope it'll
There's so many things
transcend.
I wish that, you know, had a life, and they never do, and often the things I think that should never do.
I know.
Such a shame.
I know. So have during this period, I mean, now that things are, look, please, we're all hoping, moving towards some kind of resolution. Have you had glimmers of stuff coming your way, or ideas from people about things you might do?
Yeah, what's been really, really interesting is the amount of new writing that's happening. And I've been speaking to a few people. There's a few projects that I've recorded a few bits and bobs for as they're writing, you know, just to see if things work. And so I feel really, really hopeful about the other end of this, basically. I really pray that we see change. I don't know whether it will happen, because I don't know if it's safe enough.
I think,
I feel like it has to. I feel like we need to now start, you know, as a British musical, we should be able to give it a platform and be proud of these new writers. And there's so many of them, Ed.
I know.
And some of them are extraordinary. And I just think, why are you not the next big thing? Why have I never heard of you? Or they should be heard of, because they work really hard, and there's some amazing ideas out there, and I pray that this means change.
Well, I think what you'll see, this is my vision for the future, I think we will see an expansion of these small theatres which will embrace this work. And I hope those that have had to shut down completely, like the Boulevard, for example.
What's happened with that? Is that shut
well,
down?
we're hoping that it will open again. But, I mean, who knows?
I think that's a wonderful space.
It's the most beautiful little space. You know, I was due to do a couple of conversation events there with Vanessa Williams and Simon Callow.
Oh, how brilliant.
And this lockdown came, and that was it. But the will to do it was there. There were going to be Sunday afternoon things. And I hope it happens. But, I mean, that's the perfect space for new writing. And I think what we'll see in the wake of coronavirus is that we'll see a lot of popular West End shows being embraced, because people are desperate to make money, and so they'll put on things that they know will pull coach parties in. So all the more reason for the off-West End side of things to, and regional theatre. I mean, like Chichester, like Leicester, like Sheffield, all these theatres are going to have to really sharpen their game and make sure that, you know, they embrace new stuff, because otherwise we'll just see endless revivals of the same.
I know, we need to be creating. That's what we do. That's why we all went into this, to create. And, you know, there's nothing better than originating a character or a show, and it's an extraordinary thing.
So, you know, when you're not performing and when you're, you know, at home with George, do you have similar tastes, Laura, in music and such like?
We do. I mean, what's lovely is that when I met George, he was doing Versailles. He was in the BBC TV series called Versailles. And I remember we did a play together, and we met on the first day, and I said to him, "Oh, you know, what do you do?" I didn't know who he was at that point. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm just about to go and do season 3 of Versailles." He said, "But do you know, my one dream is to be in a musical." Oh. I was like, "Are you kidding? Really?" He said, "I'm absolutely fascinated by musicals." And anyway, halfway through the rehearsal, we found out that one of his favourite musicals that he'd been to see, and he told me about how he'd been to see Parade at the Southwark Playhouse. And I said, "I was in that." He said, "What?" He said, "No." He said, "That's the thing that made me realise I wanted to do musicals." I said, "Well, I was in that." And it was so funny. So George, he absolutely loves musicals. He's such a fan of them, and that's so lovely that we have that. And do you know, he also makes me remember why I love doing musicals. It's like when you show a child something for the first time, you see it through their eyes, and you go, "Wow, that sky really is an incredible blue, isn't it?" You know? Yes. And we sometimes can take it for granted, but George, I'll get an audition for a musical, and he'll go, "Oh my God, I'd love to be in that." And it's so lovely, and you go, "Yeah, do you know, that would be a really amazing job." You're right.
Because that's great, because it's really easy to underestimate how tough showbiz marriages are in a way, because you know, it's a precarious profession, and you've got to support each other.
You do.
Well, as a profession, we have to support each other.
That's right. I mean, we've both been during lockdown. It's been interesting because the one thing that has continued, luckily, is television and film work.
Right.
So George especially gets a lot of self-tapes. So most of lockdown has been spent, you know, both of us reading in for each other's self-tapes and setting up the whole front room as a studio, and it's insane. And I'm sure everyone else has been doing the same. But, you know, we just have to be kind to each other and say, "Can you help me today?" You know.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, bucket list shows, roles, Laura, that you mentioned most of Sondheim show. Are there any particular roles that you covet and would love to do? I've got one that I think you should do, and that's Reno Sweeney in Anything Goes.
I mean, that would be amazing.
I mean, someone's got to revive that before long, because it's been ages, and it's
it is happening, isn't it?
Aren't they? They're
yes.
Doing one
yes. I think it's that as well.
That is happening.
It is.
Oh, bugger!
What is it? We'll do some research.
But, yeah, I mean, that's a show. But what about others that you, or are you happy just to embrace the new?
I'm definitely all about the new, but there are obviously roles that you have your eye on, and I mean, most of them Sondheim, of course. Sally, Follies.
Yeah.
It's a funny one, that, because, you know, it's so rare that it's ever put on. You've got to sort of hit it at exactly the right point. Yeah. You know, so who knows with something like that. And again, Sunday in the Park with George, Dot, which was really exciting that it was coming over. I don't know if it is still coming over now. Is it going to happen, do we think?
It's like all these things. It's a subject to people's availability, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is.
And hopefully they will happen. But, you know, things are being postponed and indefinitely. I mean, so I have no idea. But look, we've just got to get out of this first.
We have.
And get to a situation where we can actually feel. Won't it be strange, though, being able to, interact physically and being able to be in close proximity. And,
I agree. I think we're all going to feel a bit peculiar initially,
Yeah.
and still like we're not allowed to. I was lucky enough to do a Little Night Music at Holland Park during.
Oh yes, with Alex Barker.
That's right. Yeah.
And Janie in the Rain, the biblical rain.
Janie in the Rain. Gosh, that was amazing. And it was so funny because we were doing this concert and all we kept saying was, we're so lucky. I can't believe we're doing this. We're so lucky to be doing this.
Yes.
And it's extraordinary. And we just felt we'd been so dehydrated, you know.
Yeah.
We just needed to perform. We needed to be on a stage. And it was the most incredible feeling. And the downpour was, I've never seen rain like it, honestly. And people in the audience, they sat there. I didn't see anyone leave. But I could see like rain dripping from their noses. It was horrific.
Because
but
they were determined. They were there. And, you know, it was very moving. And I think we'll all be, I know I'm going to be a puddle when I hear an orchestra for the first time. You know, it's a long year. It's been a very long year, and yet in other respects, it seems like it was yesterday. It's very odd. Time has lost all meaning.
It has, and I don't know about you, but I almost feel lost. I feel like I'm sort of walking around in this other world, and I'm looking forward to not going back to my normal life, but just an essence of what we had, and gosh, I really hope it's sooner rather than later.
Well, so do I, and you know, I went down to Chichester to do a couple of conversations for Daniel, and one with Sheila Hancock and one with Michael Ball, and the Sheila one was actually in the theatre on the main stage, just the two of us, and in an empty theatre.
Oh my goodness!
Live
it's
streamed,
a huge stage.
Live streamed, and we were just told that if you want to talk directly to the audience, that camera with the blue light is the one you should look at, which was miles away. You know, it was, and it was a wonderful experience because, in a weird sort of way, the audience were there. You know, you just felt their presence in that auditorium.
Oh, how lovely.
So I'm going back to do, in the spring, 3 more, including one with Patricia Routledge, which is a show we've been doing forever.
Yeah.
But Patricia, I said, you know, are you going to be okay without an audience? Because she plays comedy so well and she gets so many laughs. And she said, well, you know, we'll laugh at our own jokes.
There we go. That's pretty much me anyway. Laugh at my own jokes, no one else does.
Anyway, Laura, I'm so grateful for you to chew the cud. And I look forward to seeing you in person before long, but also in person as a performer before long. I thank you.
I really hope so.
So much for this.
Oh, thanks, Ed. It's been lovely.
In an ordinary life was an ordinary man, and the jewels that are fake, and I fit in a chair, and more than your fair share, more than my fair share of chocolate cake. To chocolate cake.